Bringing the former Labor Senator Stephen Conroy. Stephen, good to see you. So the Prime Minister, he was in freefall at the back end of last year. Has he retaken the narrative now?
Well, I think the decision to change the structure of the stage 3 tax cuts has certainly meant that he's no longer, to use your words, in freefall. I think the government would have been pleased to see the Newspoll figures out yesterday, which said that that freefall, I don't accept your characterisation, but that freefall that you mentioned is certainly stabilised, and I think now the pressure is on Peter Dutton. I mean, it's very hard. I've been in opposition. I've sat there in circumstances like this where you don't like the policy the government have adopted. You say you'll change it, but you've got to vote for it.
Yeah.
So Peter Dutton is going to struggle to say Labor have, Labor have broken their promise. They've been unfaithful to you, and yet he's about to vote for the exact same policy. So it's going to be harder for Peter Dutton.
So is that how Labor comes back at him then, by saying, well, I mean, you're accusing us of, breaking an election promise, but ultimately you're supporting it. You're supporting a broken promise. Is that the politics of it?
I think his problem is that 80% of Australians are better off. And so if he wants to maintain an attack on Labor while voting for the policy that Peter Dutton is attacking Labor on, when 80% of Australians are better off. Newspoll yesterday said 63% of Australians support this.
Yeah,
he begins to be in a very difficult position. And so I think that's going to frame the first few weeks of Parliament, and then obviously we'll lead into the budget.
Yeah.
And this is a tax cut that 80% of Australians are better off, which is not inflationary. So they can't say, right, Labor's out there spending money, Labor's out there doing this, it's going to cause interest rates to go up, inflation.
Yeah, not inflationary yet. It might be down the track. We'll have to wait and see though. But having been here before, and we spoke about this last week too, Stephen, the coalition line, they're going to attack the integrity. The broken promise, the broken promise, the broken promise. That's going to be right up to the election, which, the government obviously feels like it can sustain, but how damaged is that repeated message going to be for him? How much skin is he going to keep losing over that?
I think if the coalition are able to land that, if their objective is quick, we've just got to get the tax cut issue off the table. For God's sake, we don't want to talk about the tax cut anymore because we voted for it. But what we want to do is build a narrative over the next 18 months that you can't trust the Prime Minister. That's what they've got to try and aim for. They want no distractions on we're going to restore the tax cuts. I mean, there's a lot of pressure inside that party room saying you've got to commit. This is our solemn promise. We've got to commit to restore this. The problem they then got going forward is that, let's say it's about $28-30 billion of expenditure going into the next election. They're promising for the wealthiest 20% of people in Australia. So their real challenge is not just we've got to vote for this, we're breaking our own promise. It's we can't lock. If our single biggest spending commitment, our biggest promise going into the next election is to restore $28-30 billion to the wealthiest 20% of Australians, that's a very difficult message. So what they've got to do is get it off the table, not promise to restore it, because that would be a very difficult sell at the next election. Stick to the message that Albo can't be trusted. That's got to be their message. And while the overwhelming number of Australians are supporting this, that will be blunted. They will need to prosecute that case. They will need the government to make some changes to other policies so they can build not just on a one-off. They've got to try and sustain it on 2 or 3 issues. I think, the government Albo are going to be across that. They're not going to let themselves be exposed. They've got the vast majority of Australians behind them on this change, but it would be careful. They'd have to be very careful if they were going to, change policies that they promised going into the last election.
All righty.
This.